Hello there, and welcome to the latest edition of the podcast, probably the last one of 2019. This week I'm going to look at connected or disconnected, and what this means in the life of a writer. To write, you have to know a lot about the world. You need to have lived, certainly in relation to your book, to write something realistic and something that connects with your audience. It doesn't mean you have to be of a certain age to write. You can have lived the life of a teenager and write as a teenager for a teenage audience, for example. But something that will enhance your writing is the research you're able to do. Get on the internet, get out into the real world and immerse yourself in the things that will improve your work. Larry L. King says, write, rewrite. When not writing or rewriting, read. I know of no shortcuts. And I can see what he's saying. But being connected to the rest of the world as a writer can also bring problems. I personally sit and write at a laptop with internet connection. Every time I get a new email, it flashes up in the corner of the screen. If it's something mundane, I don't feel the need to look at it, let alone answer it. But if something interesting comes along, I do find it hard to resist at times. Once I'm off the screen of my Word document, the fact is that might take some time to get back to my writing. These little journeys of maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes at a time really do add up during the day and can steal several hours of writing. There are two schools of thoughts for this. Firstly, you should shun all other distractions and concentrate wholly on your writing. Secondly, you can't write every day, all day, for fear of burnout, so doing something else for a little while at a time is good to keep you fresh. So let's have a look at these. Writing all day long. I don't mind admitting as a long-standing writer that I don't have a complete pair of feet in one camp or another in terms of this argument at the moment. Sometimes when I see situations like this, I try and apply mathematics logic. So let's have a look. I can write at 2,000 words an hour. I can sit and write for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week minimum. That means I can write 80,000 words a week at this rate. That would be about the size of an average novel. On that basis, I could write a novel every week. It's quite a tempting way to look at the productivity levels of a writer. Delivering 80,000 words in a week would mean that each novel would be ready to edit every 7 days. A writer that can get this much work out there would have a greater chance of their work reaching people, because there'd just be so much more of it. The other school of thought, writing with a break. But would it be of high enough quality to build a readership? So we look back at producing a novel a week. Is that something that's going to be of the right quality? Somehow I doubt it. When I edit my work, I can see parts that I've written at the end of the day, the end of the week, or after a poor night's sleep. The writing doesn't feel as sharp, it doesn't flow nearly as well, and there's mistakes in continuity or simply a bunch of typos. Editing is much more like hard work on the writing that's performed when my mind isn't fresh. I like to break away from my writing several times a day to do something different. This might be some time on a games console, some TV, a cup of tea, some reading. Whatever it is, I'm not writing. When I come back to the writing process, it flows better, it feels fresh in my mind. If I've come across a particular problem before the break, it becomes much easier to solve. In my first novel, David's Goliath, I overcame this problem on more than one occasion. Sometimes the words flowed, but at others it just came to a standstill. A break from the writing really helped. Here's a short excerpt from a part of the book that I stalled on, but where being disconnected from my writing helped. When he was hit by the car, there wasn't a lot of hope given to his survival. David's friends who were at the scene quite quickly were told that he wouldn't make it. The injuries he suffered were causing him a lot of distress, and the bang to the head was the one that they were most concerned about. It was causing massive internal bleeding, and the chances of coming out of this alive back in the 1990s were very slim. It was at this time that David's spirit decided to break off part of David to preserve him forever. He was split into two, and the spirit that remained with David was the one he had now. The spirit that was sent away from the body to preserve him for the future was detached and never completely reattached. It took a few moments for David to take all of this in. He'd gone from wondering who close to him might have written down his deepest, darkest secrets to find out that he'd actually done this to himself. In many ways he breathed a sigh of relief. He now knew that he didn't have a stalker or a betrayer in his life, but in others it seemed like an anticlimax. This was for two reasons. The first was that he didn't have the intrigue and the mystery to figure out who done it, and the second, that he couldn't read ahead. Without someone who had mysteriously been passed down the ability to read this language, David would never know the future until it had already happened. As I said, that was something that I struggled over, took a little bit of time over, and it was taking a break and coming back to it that helped me to produce something that I'm really quite pleased with. As I say, it's probably the last one of the year, so thanks for listening in, and have a great Christmas. prosperous new year, and I hope to speak to you soon. Bye now.